In the spring of 1974 in the Valley of Virginia, talented lacrosse players and coaches came together to build on the success of the 1973 season and to put in the work to earn their own success. The results were a magical season and a rise to the top of the NCAA Division I Lacrosse University Division. This is the story of the 1974 Washington and Lee University lacrosse team and one magical season as Washington and Lee men fall in line.
When Washington and Lee's men fall in line, we're gonna win again another time. For WNL, I yell, I yell, I yell, and for the university, I yell, and we will fight, fight, fight for every yard, circle the ends and hit that line right hard, and we will roll those wahoos on the side. Yes, by God, rah, rah, rah.
In the spring of 1974, the head coach of WNL Lacrosse was Jack Emmer. Coach Emmer had the following comments about his memory of his 11-year stint at WNL in his 40-plus year coaching career, coaching lacrosse, and also memories of specifically the 1974 team.
Well, they're the fondest of memories for a lot of good reasons. One was the tremendous talent that I inherited, that Dick Slaza recruited, and I inherited when I got there. My time at West Point, I was there for 22 years, was a fantastic coaching experience, and I maintained relationships with so many of those guys. And my 3 years at Cortland, I met my wife there, and we had a wonderful, enjoyable time. But Washington Lee was particularly, let's say, heartwarming and impressive from my career standpoint, in that we were able to be in a situation where we were a Division III program, but playing on a high level of Division I lacrosse, and the effect we had on the university, the students, the alumni, the faculty was pretty incredible at the time. I don't think you can experience something like that too often in a coaching career, but that made it very, very special. 74 was the most talented team we had. Not only talented, but veteran for the most part. They were through a successful 73 team filled with most of the same guys came back in 74. We were undefeated both years in the regular season, 73 and 74. But 74 was the absolute best team.
Now let's take a look back at that magical season. We'll take a look at 5 critical games: UVA, Towson, Cortland, Navy, and Johns Hopkins. We'll also hear from the coaches and some of the players. On April 20th, 1974, Washington and Lee's lacrosse team traveled over Afton Mountain to Charlottesville to meet the University of Virginia Cavaliers on the lacrosse field. Let's go to some of the action. In early action, defenseman Tom Kegler, number 24, to goalkeeper Skeet Chadwick, number 44, to defenseman Jimmy Farrar, long cross field pass to Kegler, to Skip Lichtfuss, number 30. Lichtfuss sets up the WNL offense. Back to Lichtfuss, who circles behind the goal. Lichtfuss spots an opening, shoots, goal. WNL scores the first goal in the first quarter, 12:40 left. Later in the first quarter, Bauer working behind goal. UVA pressing. A double team on Bauer. He passes to 41 Chasney, who passes to 26 Don Carroll. Goal. WNL leads 3-0 at 6:26 mark in the first quarter. Later in the first quarter, UVA working on goal, deflected by Chadwick. UVA ball working on goal. Number 12, John Lally, makes a steal. Gets it to Chadwick. UVA moving the ball upfield. W&L makes a steal. They begin their counterattack. Up to number 26, Don Carroll. He crosses a pass to number 45, Jack Dudley, and he scores. 8-5 with 12:29 left in the third quarter. UVA heading upfield. They take a shot. Chadwick deflects. There's a scrum in front of the goal. Keegler, number 24, controls the ground ball. He gets it to Skeet Chadwick. Chadwick starts the counterattack, a long pass upfield to Skip Lichtfuss, number 30. Lichtfuss heading upfield. Behind the goal, he passes out front to 41, Brian Chasney. Goal. W&L leads 10-5 with 3 minutes and 12 seconds left in the third quarter. Late in the game, W&L makes a steal. The ball goes to 45, Jack Dudley. He gets it to 43, Dave Warfield. Warfield leaves his defender in the dust. Pass to Dudley, goal. W&L leads 13-9. Lichtfuss in the faceoff. He wins and gets the ball to number 41, Brian Chasney, who moves upfield. UVA pressing a defense. Chasney moves behind the goal. He spots Lichtfuss out front, who shoots. Goal. Warfield with the ball behind UVA's goal. He cuts back and forth on the side of the crease. He gets an inside step on his defender. Goal. Cavaliers moving upfield. They take a shot on goal. Chadwick saves and gets the ball to number 20, Ken Miller, to start the counter break upfield. Miller passes to Dave Warfield, who finds number 28, Chris Larson, in front of the goal. Score. Lichtfuss at the faceoff. He controls. Final seconds ticking down. Lichtfuss heads upfield. He's pinned on the sideline. That's it. Time expires. The crowd rushes the field. Final score, Washington in lead 13, Virginia 11. Let's now hear from Coach Emmer about the 1973 and 1974 UVA wins.
73, let me go back a year. W&L beat Virginia for the first time. And that was the first time that Washington Lacrosse had beaten Virginia, 73. They lost to them in 72, but came back, and that was Dick Slaz's last year. And in my first year in 73, we were fortunate enough to beat Virginia. So beating, the prominent state team by little old W&L was special. So then we were in a situation where, okay, was that a fluke or not? But in '74, we came back and beat them legitimately, you might say. It wasn't as much of an upset in the lacrosse community world as it might have been the year before. So that was very special. But winning that game was particularly special to do it now 2 years in a row. And we went on, Washington Lake did, to beat Virginia 5 years in a row. We mention that to people now, since WNL is now a Division III team, that we beat Virginia 5 years in a row, and that's unbelievable by most lacrosse people have a hard time understanding that, but that was the case, so that was very special too.
Number 34 defenseman Jim Farrar was a co-captain of the 1974 WNL lacrosse team who earned third-team All-American honors. He was inducted into the Washington and Lee Athletics Hall of Fame in 2006. He shares some of his thoughts on the 1974 season.
You know, lacrosse has been an important part of the WNL program since its days as a club sport in the 1930s, and then as a varsity team since, I think, 1947. But Dick Slaza's arrival in 1968 would mark a new era in both player performance and team success. In addition to the good players who had naturally gravitated to WNL, Dick recruited some exceptionally talented players who formed the nucleus of the early 70s teams. And at the end of the 1972 season, Dick, of course, departed to take the head coach position at the Naval Academy. And as we know, Jack Emmer replaced him. In the summer of 1973, Jack hired St. Paul's school coach Chuck O'Connell as his assistant. And for the next 11 years, until Jack left to become the coach at Army, they built a remarkable program. They set the bar high, but the rewards of both individual and team buy-in were enormous. Jack and Chuck understood talent, and they knew how to deploy it. They were very creative. They established an environment in which average players could get better and very good players could become great. They also established a very strong team work ethic. Our early season conditioning included long runs around town that the players called the streets of Lexington. And when we got back from that several mile run, they had us do 440-yard sprints around the track. And, of course, we loved to complain about how tough it was. At least I did. But, in fact, we were very proud of how hard we worked. And by the time the regular season began, we knew we could run with or outrun every team we played. And that would prove to give us an edge down the road, particularly in close games.
Chuck O'Connell was a standout athlete in football and lacrosse at Denison University. He came to Washington and Lee in 1973 to be an assistant coach in both sports. He eventually moved to various sports administration roles for WNL that ended with his retirement 32 years later in 2005. He was inducted into the Washington and Lee Athletics Hall of Fame in 2014. Coach O'Connell comments on the 1974 team and season.
But the fact that little old Washington and Lee, and this was written, little old Washington and Lee in the mountains of Western Virginia could do what we were doing in Division I. We were the little engine that could, if I remember correctly, somebody wrote. So just the fact that we could go against the bigger guys and beat them really helped to propel that. Well, a part of that, you've got to take a look at the development of that team. And again, I give credit to the successes in 73. The 73 really solidified who we were, and 74 validated it. And now I come down here and I'm going to coach, and I know most of the players even beforehand. Some of them I had coached. I actually coached them, had coached against them during my high school time in Baltimore. And I also coached summer league, so some of the WNL players played for me in summer league, and I coached against some of them, so I knew them. What impressed me, I knew what the talent was. But what impressed me, and I think what helped to build what was necessary to beat Towson, was the practices were intense. The work ethic was excellent. The competitiveness during practice was amazing.
On April 27, 1974, the Tigers of Towson University visited Lexington to take on the Generals of Washington and Lee in lacrosse. The Tigers had upset on their minds. Towson was the number 1 rated team in the college division of NCAA, and Washington and Lee was number 3 rated in the university division. Let's move to action in the first quarter. 34, Jim Farrar, who passes back cross field to 24. Kegler brings it upfield. He slips and falls but maintains the ball, gets it to Jay Monahan, number 14. Monahan gets it to 43, Dave Warfield. Warfield working the back of the goal. His defender slips. Warfield working. He finds an opening and scores. WNL ties the score at 4-4 with 3:15 in the first quarter. Later in the first quarter, Skip Lichtfuss, number 30, settles the offense to number 41, Brian Chasney. Back to Lichtfuss for a quick shot goal. WNL takes the lead 5-4 with 15 seconds left in the first quarter. Later in the second quarter, WNL gets the takeaway to Chadwick, who launches a long upfield pass to Kegler. Kegler gets the ball to Dudley. Dudley to Warfield, who is crushed between 2 defenders. Number 16, Bill Reenhall, picks up the ball to 26, Don Carroll. Score! Later in the second quarter, WNL on defense. Tom Kegler, number 24, gets a steal. He sends it to 47, Dave Eubank. Eubank scoop passes to 44, Skeet Chadwick. Chadwick launches a long upfield pass to number 45, Jack Dudley. He passes to 26, Don Carroll. Goal. The Generals tied at 8-8 with 6:50 left in the second quarter. The Generals pulled to within 1 of the Tigers with 5:22 to go, but Towson then opened up a 3-goal lead with D'Arcangelo and Lichtfuss connecting within 19 seconds to give the Tigers a 17-14 lead. The Generals' unbeaten streak at 9-0 was in real danger of ending. What happened next was one of the best come-from-behind wins with all the chips on the table in the long history of Washington and Lee athletics. Unfortunately, the extended game time exceeded the film capacity of the 16mm film of that era, so the final goals were not captured on film. But maybe even better than film, the step-by-step account of this remarkable comeback was captured by sports columnist Bill Flesher of the Roanoke Times. Flesher's account is quoted here against a backdrop of action from the game. Here's how Flesher described the last minute of regulation and the overtime periods. Then the rally began. Carroll fired in his fifth and final score at 7:19 to make it 17-15. At 12:16, Bauer got his second, and the Generals were within one. 1 minute to go. Number 1 NCAA Collegiate Division Towson 17, number 3 rated NCAA Division I University Division Washington and Lee 16. Here's how Flesher described the final minute and overtime. The wind had died down, but the sun continued to do its thing. The scoreboard lights burned dim against the backdrop of the sun, but everyone knew those lights' digital configuration. There was timeout on the field as the Generals of Washington and Lee and the Tigers of Towson State huddled around their coaches for what was literally last-minute instructions. Towson had but to hold on for a minute, and the upset was theirs. Washington and Lee had but 60 seconds to cash in their comeback chips. Towson was up, but in the huddle they appeared down. Their eyes spoke what they dared not utter. The Generals were down, but in the huddle they were up. They had been at this point before, and they knew what had to be done. The Generals had the ball in their defensive zone with but 60 ticks of the clock remaining. A large partisan Washington and Lee crowd broke into a frenzied version of the Washington and Lee swing as the teams broke their huddles and headed back for the final minute of action. The referee's hand swung down as the shriek of his whistle was drowned out by the accompanying roar of the crowd. The white-clad Generals and the gold-robed Tigers settled down to determining which group of athletes would enjoy the thrill of the happy ending. As the clock ticked down, the Generals started their clearing attempts. Defenseman to goalie to defenseman. As the ball hung in the air, the crowd gasped. More than once, the ball barely sneaked past the outstretched stick of a Towson player. The ball cleared midfield and nestled into the possession of W&L's All-American midfielder Teddy Bauer. Towson held vivid memories of Bauer, for it had been just a year hence that Bauer had secured victory for the Generals over Towson when he notched a winning goal with less than a half a minute remaining in the game. The Towson midfielder stuck to Bauer as if his life depended on it. The stands were charged with the excitement of the moment. Bauer dodged left, then right. Everyone was sure that he was to be the man to take the final shot. Everyone was wrong. At the far end of the field, the W&L defense stood nervously. They had allowed 17 goals this afternoon, but not for any reason other than Towson's excellence. All-American goalie Skeet Chadwick had a very long afternoon, but somehow he and the rest of his General teammates knew it was not over quite yet. Chadwick's fellow co-captain Jim Farrar stood alongside as they both realized there was little they could do at this point. It was up to the offense. Generals head coach Jack Emmer stood erect on the sidelines. One had to think it had never occurred to him that the Generals might not score. He seemed to be thinking of what the Generals would do in the overtime period after they had scored. The team and the crowd seemed to sense Emmer's confidence. On the field, Bauer flipped a quick pass to attackman Dave Warfield. Warfield, known as Rave to his fans, had already notched 5 goals during the game, and now the crowd sensed that perhaps it was to be Warfield who would notch the score. Towson seemed to sense that too, for they refused to let Warfield near the goal. Warfield passed the ball to Washington and Lee's other All-American midfielder, Skip Lichtfuss. The rangy senior romped behind the goal and started to juke his defender. Lichtfuss feinted right. His defender was unimpressed. A jab step and a roll to the left, and the defender was left in the dirt. Lichtfuss moved in on the goal, gave the goalie a head fake, wound up and shot. Goal. Score tied. Bring on overtime. Lichtfuss controlled the opening faceoff in the first overtime, but a Warfield shot hit a Towson player, and the Tigers came up with the ball. 2 Towson shots went wide, but they got the ball back when Keeger lost the ball out of bounds. Then came Chadwick's robbery of Greeby, followed by the General's fast break. 2 perfect passes sent Warfield toward a one-on-one confrontation with Jones. But Towson's Dan Miller tripped Warfield from behind, so W&L was rewarded with an extra man for a minute. It didn't take long for the Generals to go ahead. Bauer took a feed from John Lally, wound up, and left Jones looking at a blur. W&L had their first lead since midway through the third period at 18-17. Lichtfuss added the clincher with 18 seconds gone in the second extra period. Taking the face-off again, Lichtfuss passed off to Bauer, who returned the ball to Lichtfuss, who had no trouble beating Jones for his 4th goal of the game. There the scoring ended, and soon after ended one of the best lacrosse games ever played on Wilson Field. Washington and Lee 19, Towson 17 in overtime. Number 30, midfielder Skip Lichtfuss earned first-team All-American honors in 1974. He was inducted into the Washington and Lee Athletics Hall of Fame in 1989 and also into the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. Lichtfuss remembers the following about 1974.
And a way I defined it was, it was Coach Flaza kind of created the blueprint, if you will, and Coach Emmer executed it. The other thing that was impressive to me, we're in a sleepy little state of Virginia, which was by no means, a hotbed for lacrosse at the time. And yet we had nearly or about 10,000 people in Charlottesville, and we had, close to that number when we came to W&L the next year, as I recall. You don't get crowds like that during regular season games anymore. It just doesn't happen. So that was unique. That's probably my most proud moment as a player individually and for our team, because of the way that we came back and won that game against a team that was previously undefeated and ended up winning the Division II-III championship that year. So to come back in that game took a lot of we always felt that we had the ability to beat anybody. So coming back was not something that we were afraid to do, and we were really chomping at the bit to do so. And I just remember the key aspect of that game for me was when we finally got the ball back with the score down 1 goal with less than a minute to go, called the timeout, and Coach Emmer called us into the huddle. And everybody's expecting him to say, we're going to get the ball to Ted, and then we're going to go. And instead, he said, we're giving the ball to Skip. And I want you to invert behind the goal, and I want you to come to the goal and draw somebody and make the pass. So that was the intent of the whole thing. So it turned out I ended up with Jim D'Arcangelo guarding me, who's arguably one of the greatest midfielders ever to play the game. 4-time U.S. team player. There's only been 4 of them, or 3 of them that have played for 4 teams, which is amazing. And so here I am, behind the goal, and I figured I would go strong to my right hand because, I figured that's what Jimmy thought I was going to do. And I stopped and came back to the left side. And surprisingly, nobody slid. And I was looking for somebody to come and slide, and I thought I'd probably hit Dave Warfield on the wing because usually it would have been his guy sliding, or somebody from the inside, and I could have fed to the inside, but nobody came. So I just took the extra step and scored the goal, and I think there was about 17 seconds left in the game, and that put us into overtime. And then in overtime, we had to play 2 4-minute periods back then. Now it's sudden death. But you had to play 2 full 4-minute periods, which I'm sure a lot of people don't realize. And as a result, we played the 4 minutes, and we scored a goal. I think either Ted or myself had a goal in the first one, or Ted and myself. We had the 2 goals that got. One of us had one in one of the periods, and one of us had in the other period. So to me, that was a really, really significant and exciting game.
John McDaniel has worn many hats for Washington and Lee. A 1964 graduate, he was a much heralded athlete and a member of the football and lacrosse teams from 1960 to 1964. He was a member of the 61 football team that was undefeated and featured in Sports Illustrated. That team was named by the Washington Touchdown Club as the outstanding small college football team in America. Later, Coach McDaniel attended Penn, where he earned his Ph.D. in anthropology. He returned to W&L to serve as a professor of anthropology, and also he served as an assistant lacrosse coach with the 1974 team.
In the 1970s, the university administrator I deemed the best I had exposure to in my 40 years at Washington and Lee was Dean William Watt. Dean Watt and I attended a party that was attended exclusively by academic faculty members. Dean Watt was asked, "Who is the best teacher at Washington and Lee?" Dean Watt responded instantly, "Jack Emmer." I asked the question, would the dean at any other university in those circumstances, that is a collection of academic faculty, have selected a coach? My response is, I doubt it. Those of us who know Jack think that defines in a very special way what he was. I played for Lee McLaughlin's undefeated, untied football team in the 1960s. It was the subject of a featured article in Sports Illustrated. The team had great leadership from its 3 captains who were bright and went on to great success in medicine, law, and finance. That fine football team would have been soundly beaten by any of the best Division I teams of the 1960s. In contrast, Jack's 74 lacrosse team was as good as any other team in the nation. There were no less than 8 All-Americans selected from the team. For those still not well informed about lacrosse, the team fields only 10 players. While Jack will be the first to acknowledge he had great players, he was the reason, in my opinion, for the team's stunning success. Jack was intelligent, tough, a great leader, disciplined, poised under pressure, creative, a great teacher, and his players loved him. I've enjoyed sports since the 3rd grade. I've studied great coaches from Belichick on down. I sincerely believe none got more from their players or presented greater challenges to those they were coaching against than Jack Emmer did with his remarkable 1974 lacrosse team, which I believe is the greatest sports team in the long history of Washington and Lee University. I can just remember being sort of stunned by the atmosphere at Navy, stunned by the atmosphere at the University of Virginia, stunned by the atmosphere at Hopkins. Those were unbelievable games. Remarkable success of those great players under that great coach at a great small university where they were still all students. They were all still students, many of them great students, but they were all students, and it was a stunning kind of example of what can be accomplished in athletics and under unusual circumstances, to say the least.
On May 11, 1974, the Cortland Red Dragons came to Lexington to face the Generals in Lacrosse. This was Coach Emmer's prior team, where he won the NCAA Coach of the Year in 1972. Online for the Generals was an undefeated regular season. Let's go to action in the first quarter. Cortland with the ball, working towards the W&L goal. A shot, Skeet Chadwick saves. To Jimmy Farrar, number 34, back to Chadwick. Chadwick throws an upfield pass to number 21, Teddy Bauer. Bauer works on the clear. He speeds by his Cortland defender and settles the ball in the offensive end. He makes a pass to 26, Don Carroll, who sends it to 12, Lally, who buries the goal. In later action, 43, Warfield applies pressure to the Cortland keeper. Bill Reinhoff applies pressure as well. The keeper throws an outlet pass. That's intercepted by number 12, John Lally. He turns to goal and gets it to 45, Jack Dudley, who does an incredible shovel shot and buries it in the goal. A scrum in the W&L offensive end. W&L gains control, number 30, Skip Lichtfuss. He gets it to 13, Ralph Bauer, who flicks it to 41, Chasney. 16, Reinhoff shoots. It gets to Warfield, finally to Chasney, who circles the goal and bounces in a goal. Score. Later in the game, number 41, Chasney, to 26, Carroll, to 21, Bauer. Left-handed shot, goal. They say that ballroom dancing is a contact sport and lacrosse is a collision sport. Cortland working against goal. Bauer steals a pass, gets it to Chadwick. Chadwick launches it downfield to 45, Jack Dudley, who is decleated from behind by the Cortland defender. He pops right up and returns the favor as good as he got. The Cortland bench voices its opinion. W&L in its man-down defense. Cortland works it around. A missed pass. Keegler gets it to number 30, Lichtfuss, who heads upfield. W&L on defense. Back to Chadwick. Lindsay to Chadwick. Double team on Chadwick. He eludes both defenders and decides to clear himself. He delivers to Chasney. New keeper in the net, number 42, Malcolm Hastings. Cortland heading upfield, shot deflected by Hastings, who gathers up the ground ball and starts the clear to number 31, John Strock. Cortland moving back upfield. Hastings with another save. Final score, Washington and Lee 14, Cortland 4. Number 21 midfielder Ted Bauer earned first-team All-American honors in 1974. He was inducted into the Washington and Lee Athletic Hall of Fame in 1993 and also into the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. Bauer shares reflections on the 1974 season.
I also always have felt extremely fortunate that our freshman year at W&L for the class of 74 was the first year of the real plastic stick. They'd had some prototypes prior to that, but the STX, head with memory and so forth, and a well-constructed design, was the stick that really started that movement. And that, along with the fact that it was also the first year of the playoffs. So to have been there as both of those things were coming about was kind of cool. It was kind of like a jumping off point for modern day lacrosse. Well, the main memory I would have is that, we only lost 2 home games in 4 years. And they were both our sophomore year to Navy and Virginia. And then went to, we were undefeated at home my freshman year, junior and senior year. Obviously, junior and senior year, we were undefeated till the tournament. So I think there was I don't ever really remember it feeling like, we couldn't lose, but we just had an awful lot of confidence that we knew that we could beat teams. And I think you had some guys that really were used to winning and wanted to win and weren't going to accept anything less. Obviously, didn't win everything, but I think we had a pretty good culture for the main bank of players that were there, that everybody had, they had a burning desire to win. And as I said, we loved playing. So just, roll the ball out and let us go. And I think that's by and large what we did. Obviously there's coaching that went along, but I think you had some good people to work with. But I guess, at one point, like the week before the Cortland game, we are, we're ranked number 2 in the country. That had never been done before by a W&L team. So that was pretty exciting. Just to be recognized, okay, we're right up there. Not that we didn't feel that we were as good as most of those teams, but, to have it just be that way. Maryland's undefeated. They're 1. We're undefeated. We're number 2, So I think that was, a good, good benchmark, if you will.
Upon completing an undefeated regular season at 14-0, the W&L Blue and White were seeded number 3 in the 1974 NCAA University Division I lacrosse tournament, behind number 1 seed Maryland and number 2 seed Johns Hopkins. The other teams that rounded out the Elite Eight were Virginia, Cornell, Rutgers, Navy, and Hofstra. The midshipmen of the U.S. Naval Academy came to Lexington on May 18, 1974 for the tournament game. W&L had beaten them earlier in the season 13-10 at Annapolis. Warfield with the ball. To Bauer. Back to Warfield. To Carroll. Carroll out to Lichtfuss. To Bauer, who cranks left-handed. Goal. W&L now trails 6-7 with. In the fourth quarter, 43 Warfield with the ball. He cuts across the middle and fires a goal that ties the game 7-7 at 9:30 left. Bauer wins the faceoff. He gets it to Lichtfuss, who sends it on to Chasney, to Carroll, who heads behind the goal, to Warfield. Warfield back to Bauer, who cranks upper right corner. Goal. W&L takes lead 8-7 with 9:12 left. Lichtfuss with the ball. He gets it to Warfield. Warfield heads up the right side. He's double teamed. He gets the ball to Bill Reinhoff, who takes a shot just as he gets hit in the face mask. It finds the goal. Lichtfuss at the face-off. Navy controls. Lichtfuss in pursuit. He causes a turnover. Lichtfuss gets the ball to Chasney, who moves upfield. Chasney finds Warfield unmarked beside the crease. He slips it in the right side of the goal. W&L now leads 10-9 at 1:11 to go in quarter four. Bauer wins the face-off and moves upfield. He passes to Chasney, who moves behind the goal. He's triple teamed but manages to get the ball to Lichtfuss. Who gets it to Bauer. Bauer with the lead is in no hurry. Bauer to Chasney. Crossfield to Warfield. Warfield to Chasney. To Bauer. To Warfield. A bit of keep away. Warfield's pass goes wide. But W&L flicks it back into the offensive end. To Warfield, who puts the ball in the goal. W&L leads 11-9 with 14 seconds left. Final score, Washington and Lee 11, U.S. Naval Academy 9. This sets up a semifinals showdown with Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. Number 44, Skeet Chadwick, was the goalkeeper and co-captain of the 1974 team. He earned first-team All-American honors and also was named the 1974 NCAA Goalkeeper of the Year. He was inducted into the Washington and Lee Athletics Hall of Fame in 1994 and also into the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. Chadwick comments on the 1974 season.
And, it was actually magical. You think about the support we had from fans and, the people I just spoke about. You just can't imagine how much that meant to us. But in the end, there was one key ingredient that made all the difference in the world, and that was Coach Emmer. As you probably know, Jack was the College Division Coach of the Year in 1972 at Cortland State. He came to WNL for the 73 season. That season, he was again named the College Division Coach of the Year. And then the 74 season, we moved to the University Division, and he was the University Division Coach of the Year, which is just an easy way of telling you how important Jack was to our success. He came in and he challenged us both physically and mentally, and he got the most out of everyone, both physically and effort and just sheer commitment to what we were doing. I can't say enough about Jack and what a great coach he was and what a great person he is. Say, more about the coaching staff. So, we had two great assistant coaches who also made huge contributions to the team's success. First, Chuck O'Connell. He brought fresh offensive schemes and ideas to our coaching staff, and something we didn't have prior to Coach Emmer's arrival. And so Chuck made a huge contribution to our success. And then Coach John McDaniel. He volunteered his time and his skills so generously. As you know, a longtime professor of sociology and anthropology here at WNL. He was also an All-American midfielder for the Generals in the mid-'60s. He helped the staff in a lot of ways, but John, most importantly, was the goalie coach. And he worked with me for over 2 years and substantially improved my game. He also worked with other goalies throughout the years, including two that are in the WNL Athletic Hall of Fame, Charlie Brown and Bobby Clemens. But Coach McDaniel was also a significant contributor to the overall success of our team. First, I guess, to me, the second most important thing about that season was the tremendous support that we received from the WNL community, the student body, the administration, faculty. Jerry Darrell, for instance, a longtime food service manager. Jerry, for the students' support was remarkable, and it really made a difference. The Virginia game, for instance, Jerry Darrell rented school buses so that the students who didn't have rides to go to Charlottesville could make it to the game. And that's an example of how we got just amazing support from everybody in the WNL community. And even the local community, the local merchants, and we had fans in the local community who'd come out to those games. And I think combined, that had a big hand in our success that season.
On May 25, 1974, the Washington and Lee lacrosse team traveled with a large contingent of fans from Lexington to Homewood Field in Baltimore for the number 3 seeded Generals to take on number 2 seeded Johns Hopkins in the semifinals of the 1974 NCAA University Division I lacrosse tournament. The blue and white announced their presence dramatically as number 21 Ted Bauer wins the initial face-off and heads to goal to score in 8 seconds. WNL 1, Johns Hopkins 0 at 14:52 in the first quarter. Since this goal happened faster than you can say it, let's take another look in slow motion. As famous 1970s era ABC sportscaster Keith Jackson would say on such a spectacular play, Whoa, Nelly. Later in the game, W&L on defense against Hopkins star number 30, Jack Thomas. He takes a shot and Chadwick denies and starts the clear. In later action, number 30, Skip Lichtfuss at the faceoff. Hopkins controls. Number 47, Dave Eubank, causes a ground ball, which number 41, Brian Chasney, scoops up and heads upfield. He passes to number 16, Bill Reinhoff, at the top of the crease, who buries the goal. Hopkins number 30, Jack Thomas, circles around the goal and shoots. Chadwick denies. Hopkins then unleashes a number of shots, and Chadwick denies them all. No verbal description is needed, just the poetry in motion of the 1974 NCAA Goalkeeper of the Year at work. Final score, Johns Hopkins 11, Washington and Lee 10, by the narrowest of margins, closing out a magical 15-1 season for the Generals. Students come to Washington and Lee to learn, to pursue excellence, to nurture a life of curiosity and learning, to prepare for lives of consequence. Athletics can be a part of that process. Sports fans love to debate over stats and relative ranks of teams. Those casual debates rank far down the line in the issues of importance and where to expend energy. Still, a sports debate can be fun over a beer with friends. So what is the best team ever at any time in any sport at Washington and Lee University? The great news is that W&L has a 150-plus year history of developing great individual athletes and teams that play to push personal records and for the love of the game. University historian Ollinger Crenshaw describes Washington and Lee baseball games versus VMI in the 1860s. Football and basketball came to W&L later in the 1800s. Picking a best team ever is a theoretical argument that in no way diminishes from the acclaimed body of work of other teams and athletes. The 1956-57 men's basketball team was 20-7, opened at Kentucky, yes, that Kentucky, and beat UVA twice. 1919 football was 6-1 and beat Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, and South Carolina. 1950 football was 8-3 and went to the Gator Bowl. Yes, that Gator Bowl. 1961 football went 9-0 and was featured in Sports Illustrated and named the Outstanding Small College Football Team of the Year by the Washington Touchdown Club. 2015 football was 10-1 and went to the NCAA tournament. Women athletes arrived in the 1990s and have built championship teams in multiple sports with NCAA tournament runs: soccer, lacrosse, volleyball, field hockey, swimming. Too many to list. Washington and Lee has won 2 Division III national championships, both in tennis, the men in 1988 and the women in 2007. There have been individual national champions in swimming, tennis, and track and field. A very rich athletics history earned over 150 plus years. One generation pushing the next to bring it all for Citius, Altius, Fortius. If one considers team record and strength of schedule, the title of Washington and Lee University Best Team Ever in any sport at any time dramatically points to the body of work of the 1973 and 1974 men's lacrosse team. Competing at the NCAA University Division I, those teams earned back-to-back undefeated seasons, marked only by a loss in the semifinals of the NCAA Division I tournament at Maryland in 73 and at Hopkins in 74. Back-to-back wins over UVA, which started a run of 5 consecutive wins against the Wahoos. In addition to its win over UVA, the 1974 team also had wins over Navy twice, Towson, Cortland, Princeton, Duke, and UNC. Numerous All-Americans, NCAA Coach of the Year, NCAA Goalkeeper of the Year. Several players and coaches inducted into the Lacrosse Hall of Fame. The 1974 lacrosse team ranks number 1, with 1973 lacrosse second by a thin margin as the best Washington and Lee University athletic team in any sport at any time.
Thank you.